Hi everyone. Welcome to Gazelli Art House. Lovely to see you all here. Thank you for coming and joining us for this discussion on Russian art in the UK ahead of next year's Year of Culture, which was announced fairly recently between the UK and Russia. So we thought it would be, given of course that the Recycle Group are part of our current show, we thought it would be a good idea to host a seminar on exactly why, how the Russian art is being generally kind of perceived here in the UK, how it's being supported both, again, locally, maybe even in Russia, and outside it, and generally kind of what are the trends to follow, what are the, from again the artist's point of view, from the institutional point of view perhaps as well. I'll introduce our lovely panelists, and then we can maybe kind of start in an informal discussion as to where it's all going and what to make of it. We have Anna Dempster, the senior lecturer at Sotheby's Institute, for MA Art Business, and her research appears in management journals of national and international standing. And she regularly consults for the industry. Andrei Blokhin and Georgy Kuznetsov, the Recycle Group.
Hello.
So they both live in Krasnodar. Andrei graduated from the Academy of Industrial Arts in Krasnodar, and Georgy in Stavropol Art College. So their solo exhibitions over the past...
Krasnodar too.
And Krasnodar too.
Krasnodar.
Academy also.
As well, yes, sorry. Yes, sorry about this. So over the past kind of few years, they've had a very intensive showcasing of their work, which included kind of museum shows, solo and group shows. Just to name a few, the Recycle Group, they've exhibited at the Multimedia Art Museum, which of course most of the works here, in fact all of the works here are from that exhibition. That was back in 2012. They've done the Mayor Museum in Paris this year, Contemporary Art Museum in Tver in Russia. Selected group exhibitions include the Glass Trust Project at the Venice Biennale in 2013 and 11. Yeah. So there's got quite a bit of, and of course the Kandinsky Prize winners in 2009 and 10. So 2 years, one after the other. So that is them. So should we start with generally kind of your observations, perhaps of what has been going on in the past few years, how you feel it developed, in the sense it being obviously the interest in, this kind of growing interest in Russian art, specifically perhaps in the UK first. Should we start from that?
Sure. London is a very exciting world city, and in some senses we've always had a connection between England and Russia, which goes back centuries and centuries. And this connection, at times has a political tension attached to it. And some governments, like the Litvinenko kind of debacle when there was this big furore, it gets politicized. But through all of it, I think there's a kind of culture kind of rises above that, and you have this incredibly interesting exchange that happens on the kind of grassroots level between artists and students coming over and students going to Russia, and people really creating a lot of grassroots initiatives. And I think now there's a lot of really interesting things happening in London, and people opening both commercial spaces and not-for-profit or educational spaces that have a specialization in Russian art and culture. And I think it's looking very positive, especially as you mentioned, with the 2014 being the year of Russia and UK cultural exchange. So there's lots of really interesting things going to happen, I think.
And what do you think in terms of over the past few years? How did it change the locally in a sense of kind of living in Krasnodar? How did it change the interest to contemporary arts locally? Let's say to be the local the support of it.
As said in Krasnodar, Krasnodar it's like a small city. It's not too big, and there are not so many institutions as in any capital in a big city, but everything that happens there is not like there is no any good galleries, but now it started to grow up. They start to grow up, and but anyway, all the art in Russia, in St. Petersburg and in Moscow. Anyway, so there are a lot of examples when some gallerists and some curators wanted to make the new museums as a perm, but anyway, all the culture is in big cities. But it started to grow up.
Do you find? I mean, there are more artists kind of coming from this general trend. Is the platform, the infrastructure, is it set for new talents to develop? Do you think, of your caliber, let's say, or of your generation in a way?
Of course, if you are an artist and you want to show something and you live in province, the first way you do it's just to go to the capital and to show something there, and after that you can have any exhibitions everywhere. So because there is no any problem to show your art. Now we have a Facebook and the internet, and everybody can see everything. You can just put on your website somewhere. So it's not a problem. Now it's not a problem. If you live in Russia, or if you live in Indonesia or somewhere,
wherever,
you have the laptop, and it's not a problem. And also the time changes, and it's more fast.
Exactly.
That's why it's not a problem.
Which is of course highlighted in the series in this body of work, this idea of maybe reliance on the on the social media, right?
Yeah.
On the technology, etc.
Yeah, of course, it's also one of our themes that we work, and the last show we did in the Multimedia Art Museum, it's all about the Facebook, and the letter F, it's like the cross. And we found some parallels between religion and the social networks, because it's like the virtual paradise. All the profiles live there, and the people live half their life in the real situation and half their life in the social media, and
And it's have you had a chance to kind of you're familiar obviously with the boys, right, with their work, and
I think what's really interesting about their work is how it's kind of tapped into. It's kind of relevant locally, and it also has a global relevance. And I think that the most exciting contemporary artists can kind of marry the two. And I think that for art to be really authentic, you have to believe that it comes from a true concern of the artists. Your concern, your generation. You're very technologically savvy, but it's got to kind of have resonance with an international group of people. And I think one thing that Russian art is really, really good at doing, and I think that's why there's so much interest in it, and it will go forward, is marrying this kind of very like social sensitivity with kind of technical excellence. And it's not just, it's conceptual art, but which is technically good and skilled art. And I think this is something which comes from a very strong educational foundation that you have in Russia, which, controversially, I would say, has been lost in a lot of countries in the West. And the fact that the education there is so rigorous and so long, and artists are really forced to push their own boundaries of their own technique. And I think that that's one of the reasons it's such an interesting time for Russian art, because as conceptual art is becoming extremely, it's kind of, we've been there and we're all a bit bored of it, really. The white rooms. This is a new generation of conceptual art, which harks back to technique. And I think I'd be very interested in your kind of take on the marrying of these of the recycling of the ideas and craft that you do in your work as well. That's
Yeah.
Sorry, very
In Russia,
in English.
It's a big problem because work with technology, because nothing not to do well. For example, in the past, if you're artist, you must know how it works, how to make a paint, how to mix the color, how to cover the whole canvas, and a lot of technical things. But now the time is changed and technology is changed, and new materials have a story. For example, the rubber, this is one story. Polyethylene is the next, another story. And you have a, if in the past you have colors and
gestures,
movements. This is your instrument. But now you can two voice. First voice is your idea. A second voice is technical. And in Russia is a problem really, because it's very difficult to find something new materials.
Physical materials.
Yeah, physical materials.
Also physical. There are a big cluster of Russian art from the 80s till our time. They used very low quality materials, and it was like a part of idea. It was not as so, and it's the наиболее известная на Западе, как сказать.
The more
famous in the West, that all Russian art is a low quality technician, low quality art. But now time changes, and as we see some artists as the IS plus F, maybe, and so we also use the new materials like polyurethane and just a lot of it, and also we used very difficult materials as the magnetic liquid with the kinetic pieces. So we don't have any pieces here in the gallery, but we used before, and now it's okay. So start to be okay.
How important is it to have these materials sourced in Russia? Is it important? Would you consider having works or body of work? Have you done this the certain body of work before, where the material is specific to a different region altogether, to a different country, to a different? Or is it usually sourced just geographically? It makes sense, obviously.
The main materials we use are international, so we buy some polyurethane rubber from USA, we find something in China. Yeah, it's not a problem because we have a big port with the ships.
Port.
Yeah, and not far from our city, and there we just go and buy some materials. It's not a problem now. And all the materials are produced everywhere. No problem.
No, exactly. So I mean, in terms of this link to again Russia, I mean, is it mainly, do you think, conceptually driven for you, or is it something again for you, the concepts, the ideas? Like you said, there are two kind of things that go in your mind right before producing a body of work. It's the concept, of course, and the technical side. So the technical, I guess, with the materials, there's no reference to, home country or Russia. From the concept side, I mean, even with this body of work, is it just certain topics explored generally, or?
These works not belong just to only one region. I mean, like Russia. So we work with the international themes. It's like archaeology of future. It's the archaeology of our time. Yeah, and everywhere is a globalization. If you will come to Moscow or to London or Paris, you can see a lot of similar things, and we are discussing in our works about the archaeology, and it doesn't matter which region is it.
Yeah.
That's why we don't care about the local producers of materials, because it's also international, and the world become like one big piece. It's not like a lot of countries as before.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. I mean, how do you think, how important is it to have this? I remember we held another seminar, but when was this? A few weeks ago on a similar topic, but exploring Latin American art here in London and how it's perceived, etc. Just kind of this trend again in light of what's been happening. And a thing that was raised there, a topic that was raised was stereotypes. How a lot of the times you've got this local stereotype of, well, in that case, what is Latin American art, and in our case now, what is Russian art? How important is it, do you think, to have this kind of distinction or definition in place?
Well, I think nowadays, when people think of Russian art, one of the first things they probably think of is Pussy Riot. And there's actually a conference on Pussy Riot in Pushkin House recently, which I actually didn't. I kind of decided not to go to because I found it so annoying that there was an entire conference dedicated to this. But I think that what's interesting about that whole discussion is that it's very much framed in the context of a highly politicized vision of Russian art, which is from a Western perspective. So it's kind of filtered through our newspapers, filtered through, the slightly Cold War-esque concerns about the other, the dark Urals. And so we kind of get, an extreme example of some of this art activism. But I think what's interesting is there's so much more happening in Russia, so much more. And some of it is art activism, and some of it can be highly conceptual, but a lot of it is very intellectual, a lot of it is very skilled, a lot of it is very technical, and some of it is extremely classical and traditional and of extremely high quality. So again, I know artists who are still working in a sort of 19th century tradition, and that's a choice that they've made. And it's very, and it's not necessarily like, they're not copying, they are trying to do something of their own style. And I think that consumers are smarter than politicians give them credit for. And I think that sometimes when, certain galleries, I think, succeed because they are kind of tapping into a market demand that isn't the kind of stereotype. It's actually what people want, and what people want is something a little bit more interesting, a little bit more sophisticated, and a little bit closer to their own tastes. And so I think that there's a lot of interesting things happening on the ground, and it's actually a very diverse art scene, I mean, I don't know if you'd agree with that, but I think, you represent one part of this world, but there's a huge amount of diversity and a huge amount of activity. The problem is getting those artists from the ground to the West and showing them. And how do we do that? And where do we show them? And how do we present them in a way that the public that would be interested in them comes to see them? So how do we get people to your shows here or other Russian artist shows? I think that's our challenge. And going away from the stereotypes, actually, I think is a big challenge.
Kind of the way you present it, or the way...
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, do you think the various other shows, I'm trying to think, that had kind of quite a bad turnout, or that didn't go quite well as accepted, are there any examples recently? I'm trying to...
Well, I think, like, for example, one successful example, of course, the Sochi exhibition last year.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was a huge success. And I think what's really interesting is the way they divided the space up into kind of the nonconformists, who are the kind of the new classical art from the 60s, 70s, 80s, so presenting something that really hasn't been seen very much in the West, but in a very kind of traditional historical narrative. And then the bit downstairs about gaiety, I can't remember what the title of it is, but gaiety is the main... Does anyone remember? The most outstanding feature of the Soviet Union is gaiety. And it's quite shocking. I found it really shocking. Artists practicing today, which was created by Sochi himself. But I think with the reference to the fact that of the importance of humor in art, and that basically, a lot of this art is kind of funny, and it's supposed to be funny. And the fact that the politicians seem to be completely humorless and have no sense of humor makes it even more funny. So I think that the fact that everyone's so responsive to Pussy Riot and make the big fuss. I mean, it's quite it was entertaining and it was amusing, and the Russian pastime is telling anekdoty, right, which are kind of very sophisticated jokes, basically. So with a very black humor. So I think that this is this moves away from stereotypes, but requires a more kind of nuanced understanding of Russian culture, which I think in very well curated exhibitions it comes across, and that was a huge success, the Sochi exhibition.
Mm.
So
in terms of kind of interest in the reactions, a lot of talk around it, and attendance, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, do you think generally it's something what can we do in a sense, aside from obviously hosting and again curatorially, I guess, not right direction, but creating a certain context where we drift away from the stereotypes and this, essentially kind of politicized art, aside from, hosting in galleries and places, non-profits call it, or collector spaces like Saatchi's. Do you think, obviously there's the museum support, what else I'm thinking? In terms of kind of the educational side, is there much to do there? As far as here, as far as kind of Russian-focused courses or Russian art-focused courses go?
I think it's got to be a joint effort of everybody who's interested and participates in this world. And I think that, experts like yourselves, gallery, sort of commercial galleries, as well as not-for-profit, as well as educational, they all have to kind of come together and break down the kind of tendency to simplify and to label. And I think it is the role of the intermediaries to promote a more nuanced understanding of Russian art, because the artist's role is to make the art and make really great art that we can all talk about. And I think it's up to us to then talk about it in a sensible way, because their job is, we ask a lot of them to be able to make it and talk about it. And that's kind of one of the difficulties of being, I think, artists today. Because you're also asked to be great communicators in several languages, clearly. So I think events like this are really important.
Yeah, in terms of, like you said, having it all kind of about a joint effort. In terms of generally, what do you think with obviously you've shown, I've mentioned earlier, you've shown in quite a few places in Europe mainly, but of course in New York, you were saying the show opened this year. In April.
This year in Albright Next collection,
Yeah, exactly. Did you have, in terms of, again, the response to your work specifically, right? Even though, again, it's not too kind of Russia-focused but still being Russian artists, do you feel the difference at all? Or
for us, we are not such regular Russian artists as usual, because we are not using any politic themes, and it's not really interesting for us.
No.
Yeah, we just think about this way, that we think about archaeology, like social media, a lot of that lives without politics.
About our century, about our time.
Because we don't care about it. That's why there is no much difference to have a show in New York or Paris or somewhere, for us, it's one more exhibition, good exhibition, so not good exhibition. A lot of that's why.
Of things, yeah. In terms of, because you do, of course, quite a bit of commission works as well, don't you? And for particular projects, for particular, site-specific pieces even. Yeah. How? Again, without being too focused on this nationality and nationalism, etc. How much of where this site, for example, is, say if you were doing something for the Biennale, for example, in Venice, or something here, or something in Moscow, how would it affect at all culturally in terms of the output for the work itself? Or again, you stick to your own kind of concepts, disregarding this whole kind of where the work will be shown and what it's for, in a way?
Effect for us, or effect for
the way, kind of, not the way you produce the work, but what you produce for, say, a site-specific location. Does the place itself? Does it the culture of the city, let's say, of the country? Does that play a role or no?
Yeah, so we did the site-specific pieces not a lot of time. We did it several times. We did the installation in front of Grand Palais in Paris. We did the installation in St. Petersburg in New Holland Island.
Yeah, exactly.
So we did some works with Dior in France, because they have a program, Dior in Art, and they work with a lot of artists. So we are those artists who are from Russia and work with them. So there are a lot of like Maurizio Catalan, a lot of, and there are a lot of famous artists, not so much famous artists. Yeah, for us, how it works site-specific, I don't know really. So
it's not. I guess it's not kind of off, and I guess it should be. It's right. I mean, again, going back to what we're just saying, it shouldn't be perhaps such a, focused on a certain, again, region or no.
I think it's not focused on any region. Because for us, I think that if you see the artist, it's not necessary to think about where he's from.
No, exactly.
It's so if you do something and other people understand it, so the artist it's a language, and if somebody understands this language, it doesn't matter which country from which country is it. So
that's the beauty.
I like a lot of as for me, I like a lot of art from Asia, from not only from Europe, not only from North America. It's very interesting to go everywhere. You can find art everywhere. If you just check this language, you can understand it. So,
but all body ask us about. You produce it in Russia?
Really?
Really?
There are no many bears and okay.
In our art, only one Russian thing. It's connection, because Russia is like a bridge between Europe and Asia. And I think it's only one thing.
Yeah, and that's why now we will do the new show in Moscow with where you can understand some pieces that belong to Asian culture and to European culture, and we mix it with on the theme of archaeology also, and so the main role in Russian art is really the connection between Europe and Asia. As usual, it was long time before.
Exactly.
Yeah. And this theme is in the question of nationality. This theme is really interesting for us. So, if we say if you are Russians, this one.
So, in terms of again this theme of nationality is of interest. It is, or it's not. It is. Yeah.
Yeah, this one.
I think kind of coming back to your idea of the bridge and the connection, I think this is one of the reasons why Russian art works so well in London, because London has always been a merchant city, a trading city, a city of people passing through, and is very comfortable with multiculturalism, very dynamic. And it's not a kind of multiculturalism in the sense that people live in their own little areas like in New York. People here really mix, and I think there's a lot about finding connections, finding bridges, and like in your work, the bridge from the past, from the archaeology to the future, the technology, the bridge between
like
the east,
bridges.
the west. but that sort of makes sense in a global sort of society, which is the upper level of the art world. People feel very comfortable with that idea. And politics is almost like one level below that, because people who are kind of fighting their little petty political wars within their own little countries and their own little regions. And then I think that at the kind of global level of the art world, the people who participate in it are like above that. And they kind of are interested in kind of bigger questions, like the environment, which I understand you also deal with. And that's a question that has no national boundaries. Because the clouds will move across boundaries and they don't stop when they hit a border. So I think that these kind of, again, these great national questions are very relevant to a new generation of artists and hopefully a new generation of consumers who are this kind of global elite many of them from international backgrounds, educated, born in one place, educated in another place, parents from multiple different areas, and they are the new global consumers. So they need an art which isn't, isn't so specific to their little territory. So that I think, again, London is very well poised to become a place where that sort of approach can thrive. Yeah.
On the one hand, but that's the thing. That's the question that I always kind of ask myself: how important is it, these national borders and this idea of home? Because it's. I mean, despite this kind of multiculturalism of London, etc., you've got quite a bit of, and again in this case, Russian speakers or Russians living here who have lived here for a while now, for decades, and in a sense, this is their home. But of course, they have this kind of strong link and affinity to, the motherland, let's say, right, Russia, and where they're originally from, I guess. So this, I don't know. I mean, in terms of the borders, in terms of the national kind of identity and all the rest of it, it is something that perhaps they can associate themselves with if there are more of exhibitions here, if there is a bigger infrastructure here for, the Russian artists to showcase their work. Right? Or
regarding the borders, I remember when we had the opening in New York, one guy came and we told, so come on to our new opening in Venice. He asked, Venice, which state? So it's regarding the borders, yeah. So
regarding the borders, there's also that.
Yeah.
But in that case, what?
I guess it doesn't matter. So there is no any borders. It's just the formality.
It's a formality, yeah.
Yeah, that's why. So.
But then it's interesting. I mean, even the feedback, because today is obviously, sadly, the last day of the show. But the feedback that we had since we've kind of opened, it was very interesting to see. Again, at an audience. I mean, not necessarily a collector, but someone walking into the gallery, coming across your work for the first time. Very interesting to see the difference between, again, a Russian, either a Russian living here or with a Russian background or knowing something about, Russia, or someone who's completely kind of, just seeing the work for what it is without knowing the connection, without knowing those that came from there, that are kind of, or Russian speakers, they definitely saw this Russian twist to the works, or they were searching for it. So that's the thing. How far do we? Because do you see what I mean? How far do we kind of? How far can we disregard this idea of nationality and this association to kind of your home, I guess, and make it all about kind of global?
But I think it's also an issue of how much do you have to explain the work, or how much do you let it speak for itself?
Yeah.
And I think that actually, again, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but my impression is that in Russia, artists are braver at letting the work speak for itself, and with all the risks that entails. So they're not taught marketing at art school, where they are here, and at the point at which basically the work here is accompanied by a giant text explaining what the work is,
as usual.
And I think there's an issue around that. I think there's a problem around that. I think there's a problem around the fact that the Turner Prize winners in the UK use words in their artwork to explain what their artwork is doing, because otherwise people won't understand it, and that language is English. And then people say, I read somewhere, somebody talking about the Russian art market, and they were saying the reason it's underdeveloped is because people don't speak enough English. I mean, that's really bizarre to me, because why should people have to speak English in order to create great art? So I think that this issue of being kind of globally relevant is very different from being kind of homogenous and, again, conforming to some kind of stereotypical expectations of, making it easy to understand things. I think art should be difficult to understand, and it should have its own language, which is aesthetic, not linguistic. And I think that, again, successful contemporary artists like yourselves have managed that. They've managed it. And so, yeah.
What do you think the importance of textbook behind each work?
I think is more important. If you need to read a lot of text,
You should be a writer.
Yeah. You're not an artist. It's literature.
It's not a profession.
Yeah, it's funny because if you want to say something and if you're artist, you do the piece, you do the object installation or performance. You don't write a text, and visitors must understand your work. Just look on your work and understand what you mean.
So I know the funny story with one Russian artist who did the project. It was empty gallery, and there were only the texts about the pieces. There were no pieces, only the text. That this piece means that, that, and that. Yeah, and very, very long. A lot of. So it's all about this question. Yeah, that's why we don't like a lot of text. The last catalog that we did for the exhibition in Multimedia Art Museum, it was like the interview. It was the interview with the curator, and we spoke about everything, because the visitor and the people who are looking on it, it's more interesting to feel the life.
Yeah,
it's not interesting to read a very, very long
and
book.
it's funny story because our friend come with his child, and the child tell us about all our piece.
Yeah, he explained us
okay,
everything.
I know. This is the same. Yeah, it's funny.
Was he right or no?
Yeah,
90%.
absolutely.
Yeah?
Absolutely.
90.
Yeah. But it's child.
Yeah.
But I think that you have to be quite brave as an artist to do that. I think to sort of not try very hard to explain your own work, but let the work speak for itself. And I think the other thing that I would add into this equation is, you have to trust the people that are representing you to be able to, when an explanation is necessary for a consumer or a big buyer or a museum director, you need to trust the people who represent you to be able to articulate what you do really well. And I would just bring this into the equation as well, because I think we just recently had a conference at the Institute on trust and transparency in the marketplace. And I think one of the reasons that London works as an international art market is because there's a lot of trust between the different players, between the gallerists, between the artists and the consumers, and there's quite a lot of transparency about how transactions work. And I think that Russia's kind of missing that, my impression, at home, and maybe that's one of the reasons the market's not really developing as it should. And maybe that's why people come to places like this. So, harking back to your question of, what can we do or what should we continue to do? I would say we should continue to build this trust between the different players, because that strengthens the whole system. And it's a social thing. It's not something which the government can impose. It's not a regulation. It's not like you do this and then I do this. It's like we kind of just get it and we're going to work together for the next 10 years. So let's make this work. So that probably be the other thing that I would add into this.
Do you think it's generally kind of a matter of time as well, as far as this transparency kind of picking up in Russia? It's a matter of time.
I think so. I mean, I think that, Russia's a very, very new market. There was basically no art market, before 2003 at all. Nothing. And, Sotheby's goes back 250 years. More, 270 years. It's not surprising that people come to a brand. It's not like they're coming to a brand. It's not Louis Vuitton in a handbag. It's somebody who's been around for 270 years and has been doing something right for 270 years. They still exist. So I think that, the fact that people always say, all the Russian buyers are going to the big international houses or the big international galleries. They're not buying in Russia. Oh, isn't that a shame? Well, those galleries have existed for 5-6 years. These galleries have existed, or these, sales spaces have existed for 250 years. Right. Where would you buy from? Yeah. So I think that, but I think that if for what we have to instill in Russia is the idea that it's not just a one-shot game. It's many, many transactions will happen. And if people think, I will continue to exist, for the next 10 or 20 years, then more people will be willing to trust that market. Which is why when the 3 galleries closed last year, it was such a huge shock. Yeah. Because it was like, oh my God, these are the 3 most stable galleries, and they're closing.
3 famous
Yeah,
galleries.
and there was like shockwaves. If we can't trust them, who do we trust? So that kind of stability is really important. Yeah.
What do you think? I mean, what was again living in in the area?
With the galleries.
Art for survive.
Our what?
Art for survive.
Art will survive for sure.
Absolutely.
And that was the kind of the general reaction, right? The general kind of.
So the galleries that were closed. Art market in Russia, it's not.
Black hole.
It's not so much quality because there are several galleries, and I don't know what to say. So you told everything before.
In terms of the not the interest, but the comfort zone that the new collectors feel in kind of the more either purchasing more traditional works of art from Russia, or if they do kind of step into or branch into contemporary art, more of blue chip names, say the more established contemporary artists again from Russia. Do you think that's an accurate, first of all, kind of statement to make as we see it now here, and again from the collector's point of view, right? Well, I mean, your thoughts on that generally. How do we?
Well, I would say that
spread it out.
I mean, my impression is that Russian art market is often criticized. The consumers are often criticized for being very conservative. So one of the reasons that people say that the contemporary market's not evolving is because the Russian buyers are very conservative, and they want the kind of the landscapes, the kind of romantic landscapes that they recognize from their childhood. So that there may be an element of truth to that, but I think that the contemporary artists, like you, are pitching to a kind of global clientele. They're not really pitching to a Russian buyers.
New or existing buyers, yeah.
So they are like different worlds almost.
Russian collectors like to buy contemporary. All these guys who live away from Russia, they like to buy contemporary art. All these collectors who live in Russia, they like to buy traditional art because it's not smart. Because it's not smart in their world. Because as usual in Russia, there are rich guys, and rich guys work together with the government. And for the government, it's not smart. That's why they buy traditional art. It's like an impression, I think. But there's collectors who went away from Russia, who live in America and London, everywhere. They like to buy Russian contemporary art, of course. Yeah, and you can see a lot of examples.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Is it something do you think that can be worked on in a way of providing this introduction? Perhaps they don't find it what did you say, smart in their world, right? They don't kind of associate
not smart in the government, I mean, because all the big collectors
not only in government,
so all the big collectors should have a lot of money to buy a lot of art, and as usual it's close with the government, and for the government it's not smart. Marat Gelman tried to make it smart in Perm, but at least it existed 3 years or 4 years, and at least because people, most population who live in Russia, they really not understand at least the contemporary art. They try in some regions, but not because Russia is big, and not all the people can understand why it can so the price like that. Why?
Which goes back to what we were just talking about. Maybe there is a need for textbooks, explanations.
They will not read any textbooks. No.
As in kind of taking them by their hand and saying, I mean, not necessarily saying anything, but introducing them to generally contemporary art, which I guess is quite difficult at times to understand.
If there will be in each big city in Russia just a small contemporary art museum, the situation will change, but not now. But they try to make it. Some guys like Marat Gelman tried to do it, and he's a really good curator because he tried to make and he did a lot of projects in different cities, from Perm to Ufa and a lot of places.
Krasnoyarsk, Tver, and other. He worked with province.
He worked with the province.
Yeah.
He's focused on it.
With a local artist, not famous, young artist, and he support this kind of art in Russia. But it really,
he's the only one.
In reality, contemporary art have a very bad image in Russia.
In the province.
Not only in province. For Moscow, not Russia. Moscow is Moscow. London is London. Absolutely the same story. And for usual people, contemporary art is like a ugly horror and something very aggressive and something like, and I don't know. Artists try to change this situation. For example, a lot of in our city in Krasnodar, a lot of young, very powerful artists who want to change this situation, who work with local people, who make some spaces for exhibition, some spaces for education,
like alternative spaces.
They work a lot only чтобы объяснить людям, что contemporary art это хорошая штука, не агрессивная и плохая.
Just to explain that contemporary art is not so worst.
Not so
it's really altruistic. It's really altruistic work.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Earlier on, you said you were quite. What's the word? That you carefully steered away from political issues involving your art. That's great. But the views and perspectives you've got on contemporary art in Russia, outside Moscow, as you say, to change that, you will have to engage with your community on a social political issue, on a social political plane, to change that. And the only way you can do that as artists is through your work. I think you will have to engage in that conversation to change the perspective of contemporary art in Russia.
Yeah, maybe we need to make it, but so for us politics is I don't know. So it's
we do it in our work.
We do in our work the more global theme that's more interesting for us.
We try to explain. We try to explain people because contemporary art is absolutely not ugly. Is not political. Is we don't try to. We are not aware, or we are not a.
We try to explain through the works, and we're not. We don't like to use a politic because politic always changes, and it's not our theme.
When I mean politically, I don't mean in the purest sense. Do you know what I mean? I mean on a social level.
Social.
Yeah.
In a social level, we do that. We do. So we.
In our city, we do it.
We do it in our city also.
We have a lot of exhibition in the world, but absolutely every year we have an exhibition in Russia. One solo every year.
I think what makes, for me, one of the things that makes Russian art really interesting is that it somehow balances this engagement at the grassroots level, at the community level, and basically engaging with you know, like when people talk about the environment, it's literally like how dirty your local street is. And, you know, that's an issue for a lot of people who live in that street. And then we talk about the global environment and, you know, whatever, you know, international regulations we have. And I think that a lot of the artists that are operating in Russia, they have like this dual identity, and they can engage locally and globally. And that's why their art is authentic. That's why the topics that they address, they're not just going, oh, the environment's cool, therefore I'm going to do something about the environment. They're actually, like, it makes sense to their local communities at the grassroots level, and it resonates, and it happens to make sense at the global level. And that's why it's authentic, and that's why it's real, and that's why it's credible, and it has a internal beauty and an internal tension. And you know, and that's why, you know, people kind of are drawn to it. And it transcends, you know, nationalities.
Yeah, sorry, we've got another. Let's just. Sorry, microphone.
All Russian art in Holland. Yeah. In Holland, and it was a wide variety. And I'm actually here because I saw one of your pieces there. But the thing that was striking to me is, yes, it was like you said. There's a lot of things that are very international, but I had this feeling that there was a set of artists between sort of the great artists of the 20s and the 30s that everyone in the West is familiar with that are Russian. There's a whole group of a whole tradition. It's a big blank place. And it would seem to me that's the place to be looking, as the artists that no one in the West knows about just because they're not alive now. And at that moment, it was a bit of a closed world to many people in the West. I mean, that seems to me the link that would make a lot of things to make sense, because I felt there was a bit of vocabulary there that ran through all the work. That where did that come from? I mean, I knew most of it, but some of it was just, I felt like there were people, artists that I would be really interested in knowing something about, you know, between the 20s and now, that I have no clue. I don't even have a first name to start to look. I mean, who would you think of as the artists when you think about when you started out, Russian artists that you feel like made an impact on your aesthetic, on your approach to things? Someone maybe a generation older than you.
You mean from the 20s?
No, not from the 20s. I mean,
no?
Someone that was like a teacher or a little bit older than you are when you started out, that you felt made an impact on the way you approach things.
From Russian culture, you mean?
Yeah,
so
anything.
From anything. We can't say that we like any artist who is like a teacher. Of course, we had a teacher. So George's father, he's an artist too. He's a classic painter, and we usually speak with him about some new projects and everything. He can help us with advice, with something, yeah. But he works in another direction, yeah. He's a classic.
All of our parents is artists.
All our parents are artists, but they are classic painters. What
do they think about it? What do they encourage you, or do they say, "What is this?"
I'm happy about it.
They're happy.
Yeah, and they happy. We don't have a conflict.
We don't have any problems with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we speak with them, but.
I think it's one time when in Russia traditional and contemporary artists touch.
The only time.
No, but if we say about any artist who made the influence for us, I think you know all of them. It's like from Anish Kapoor to a lot of artists who do.
From Anish Kapoor to Michelangelo.
To Michelangelo, yeah. So, and
I think all artists have something really interesting, and we try to find in. Not only in artists. For us, more interesting maybe is the usual world, like a floor, walls, windows, and all of our world is interesting. All of our world can teach you something, and
you just need to see
it. If you make for idols, It's not good.
No, I was just curious, simply because I'm always interested in looking for new artists, someone I don't know anything about. And I just get this feeling that there are people's work that I would love, that I don't even know their names, I don't even know where to look. Like they're, I mean, you look at it,
we
your
love some
work,
works, but not the all artists. Like, so, of course, we love some artists, like the classic artists, like Michelangelo. It's impossible not to love it.
I think your question is really interesting because a lot of the material we've seen in London over the last, since 2003, as Anna says, when that interest in Russian art since Perestroika has come in. But the Gagosian had a big show like 3 years ago. We're all trying desperately, academically and intellectually, to kind of work out what's been happening in the 70s, 80s, and then the 90s with the new academy developing in Russia and so on. But these two guys, they're contemporary, they're younger artists, and I think they're working with global themes. The new museum in New York a few years ago had a wonderful exhibition called Younger Than Jesus, which was artists under 33. And I went round the exhibition because I was flying out before they labelled anything. I couldn't work out where anyone was from, and they were from all over the world. It's a kind of nomadic art, and I think the themes you're dealing with, like archaeology and new materials, but also your interest in garbage canned, the images, the works, the sculpture you're making that are using kind of modern garbage vans. Yeah. I mean, young people see those all over the world. My son was obsessed by those things. He could tell you every literage of a garbage van, a garbage, one of those rolly things, because this was a new development. Honestly, we used to just have dustbins, just a dustbin, Top Cat thing, and now there's this amazing kind of new technology of how to get rid of garbage, and that's linked to ecology. So I think the themes that you two are dealing with are global themes, and I think they speak to people in consumer society all over the world. But I think your point is that there's definitely, and Anna's point is that there's definitely an art history that needs to be written from the most recent art. We go to the Sotheby's and Christie's shows recently. We don't know these artists, we don't understand them, and that's because an art history hasn't been written about them. I don't know whether the court order is the one to do it, but certainly it's a gap in our intellectual knowledge. But I think what you're doing is a different thing. It's it's something for now, and it doesn't necessarily matter whether you're from Russia or anywhere else. And there probably are other artists of your generation who are interested in politics. But there's absolutely no reason why, just because you're Russian, you have to be interested in politics. In this country as well, honestly, move outside of the centre of London and people will think contemporary art stinks on the whole as well. It's no different. It's really no different.
Yeah.
I just wanted to kind of,
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for this talk, first of all. And I just wanted to ask, actually, I also thought about this because this gap, actually, for a Western person who grew up outside Russia, we kind of lost track at Malevich. We know all about 19th century.
Who are you? Who's this guy?
This black square on white? Yes, really? That thing. So we kind of, we heard about Russia and revolution, and it's great, like IDs and Malevich, and then we lost track. So we don't know what happened. So we know, social realism, but actually, from the Western point of view, we didn't see a lot of images. We didn't see a lot of exhibition catalogs. We didn't heard names. So, and suddenly in, Perestroika, there's all these names popping out from the market and Russian buying. So I think this is the big shock for Western. So what happened there? We missed a lot, I think, there. We missed this history, how to link today Russian artists to that culture, what happened in the meantime, and how did Russian artists like you, what did you see when you grew up? That was like my question. Which kind of art did you see while you were growing up, and how could you relate to, for example, what happened around the world? Because I guess when you live in London, it's easier because you have lots of, exhibitions. But so this is why I was wondering, how could you really see? Yes.
We traveled a lot from the childhood because our parents are artists, and they took us to the plein airs and to the sessions with a lot of other artists from the foreign countries, from India, from England, from America, everywhere. And they traveled a lot and took us with them, and that's why we saw a lot. And that's why we cannot say that we are the citizen of just our city and that's all. We traveled a lot. In 1 year we traveled so much everywhere, from Asia to Europe, and that's why we don't care about the borders, and that's why we saw a lot. And
for example, Kabakov for you, is it a reference or is it just I mean, it's an artist among others in conceptual art.
Tomorrow we'll have the opening of Wallace collection. There will be a 1 hour piece, and also the Kabakov's piece from the Glass Dress show from Murano. He's a great Russian artist, yeah. But so it's a reference to the time. It's a reference to the past, and he linked to the Russian culture, to Russian Moscow conceptualism, yeah, and all this kind of. So I think that these artists belong to this time, to the country, because it was another time. Now we don't have countries, we don't have borders. All of us have internet. All of us had all of us can go to the airport and go to Rio de Janeiro today, or somewhere in Cambodia. Yeah, and that's why we are all the citizens of the world, and I think so.
Find the same crappy politicians everywhere.
So you wouldn't want to be at Sachi in Russian art exhibition?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, do we have any more questions at all? No?
I love your trash.
I love your trash.
That dustbin?
Thank you.
In Russia, we just a trash artist who take a garbage, choose something.
We had a funny story with the 1 hour collector. He's from Austria. He came to our city and spoke with the government. I mean, with the gubernator of the mayor of our city. And he asked him, "Do you know the recycle group artists? They live in your city?" Yeah, that's fucking underground, yeah. Yeah, I know, but I heard. I don't know, but I heard, yeah. Okay, so...
It's funny, but it's really sad, because
it's sad,
government in Russia don't support the young art.
They tried some projects, but not so much.
Don't support contemporary art. I don't know. You can ask him.
They're afraid it. They're afraid contemporary art. Huh? Yeah, they're afraid.
In our city, we don't have any institution, any museum where the young artist can show his works. All space is, как сказать,
unlegal.
Unlegal, absolutely.
Not unlegal.
Not
so
illegal, but
it's not. Alternative places, yeah. Alternative places.
Самоорганизованные.
Sorry, I didn't really mean they...
Self-organized.
I didn't really mean they didn't support contemporary art here. We have the Arts Council, but we're more developed on that level. But even when you look at the Arts Council, there's a lot of criticisms that they're only giving money to museums in the provinces outside of London where they get enough footfall. So, you have to show... works by Tracy Emin, because that's the only way you're going to get people to come into your museum. That's the way you'll get more money. So there's still a lot of kind of things that remain to be desired, I think, even in the UK, outside of the centre of London, I would say.
But I think it's a really interesting point about how much support you need at the base of a pyramid, of a cultural pyramid. And I think in order for a lot of, for the really good stuff to get to the top, you need a lot of creativity and innovation and risk-taking. And you're bound to get a lot of rubbish, not your kind of rubbish, but real rubbish. But that's part of the game. You've got to have a lot of that stuff going on, and people like experimenting in order to create global stars. And one of the things like that the UK is actually very good at is having this fringe base. And I mean, the real success story in the UK is the fringe theatre industry, because we have some of the largest numbers of tiny theatres. Some of them are government funded, some of them are self-funded, some of them are self-organized, in like railway bridges, pubs, clubs, you name it, people's sitting rooms. And it's only through a filtering of this base of lots of little supported fringes where people pay £10 a ticket do you end up with like the major megabuster West End shows that are not only massive grossing productions that run for years and years, but are also actually creatively and artistically really good, and then tour the world. And you need this base that is supported at the grassroots level to some degree by the state, and in England they do that very, very well. So, which is another reason why there is a model, I think, that could translate into Russia, but they need to basically give people free rein to create whatever they want without being too dictatorial. And again, I think they're not so good at that in Russia. They try to get involved about what should and shouldn't be developed at the grassroots level, and it doesn't really work, because that's the artist's role to decide what should and shouldn't be done.
I think just to kind of play a devil's advocate here, it's all very great. I think obviously there is a solid, not a solid, but there is a format in a way, or a model, like you said, to follow in Russia. But when you're dealing at such a vast, again, devil's advocate, but when you're dealing with such a vast land with, again, majority, I mean, we're, I presume, all lucky here, having the opportunity to travel from a young age to get all the different experiences and understandings and knowledges, and then produce, in your case, obviously, the works which are, refer and appeal to more of a global audience, etc. But your average, Russian who hasn't had perhaps an opportunity to visit all of this, and then goes to a museum, which is only one or two, let's say, in Moscow, if they do go to, if there is even an interest there, and then sees that, doesn't completely understand anything, and then of course would never kind of go back there. And I guess in terms of the French theaters or alternative spaces, then comes the point of funding, right? So it has to be funded on the government level, and if you don't have the support on the government level, how do you not support, but this understanding or the appreciation of contemporary art, if it's all kind of a matter of traditionalist, appreciating the more traditional art, how do you tackle it? Isn't it a kind of a vicious closed circle? Or do you, I mean, I don't know, what do we think about that? Sorry, quite a gloomy thought, but I mean, in terms of, I don't know, I think as far as, again, yes, this has to be done. This definitely is a model to follow, etc. But is it real? I mean, is it realistic to have museums opening, to have French, non-profit spaces opening for the younger generation, for the younger artists to work and experiment in Russia?
I hope. There are residences in Russia for artists. Yeah, there are some places, but it's very. There are not so many like places like that. So we hope that it will happen. We hope that there will be institutions and the people will go there and will see the art. And but if we'll speak about Moscow, so yes, there are a lot of places. It's okay with the art. Mm-hmm. If we'll take any other city away from Moscow, the people who live there, the level of cultural education is much lower. That's why we need to educate them. Mm-hmm. They need to have education in institutes, mm-hmm. and to understand that The art is also the parallel substances that you can see. It's not only the comedy club, so you can go to the museum or somewhere else. So I hope that it will happen. Yeah, but when it was opened, the museum in Perm, the first 2 years they were crowded. Then it was changed. Something with the government, and I don't remember exactly. I don't know. Something changed, and the people were against of it, and they don't really like it. And they don't like the 70% of people who live in this province city. They don't like the site-specific art, like land art or any sculptures, contemporary sculptures in the city. They really don't understand what's the icon man. What the guy who made the guy from the icons from buttons from iPhone, you know, that with the application buttons. It's the sculpture of good Russian artists. They put this sculpture. It's good. It's kinetic. It's really wow effect sculpture. So it's very, very open. And the people, the 70%, they told like, why did you spend this budget to such kind of things? They did not really understand why. They thought about they thought that it will be better to do something for children, for a lot of, but not for the art, because in Russian province cities, the mentality is that art is the least substance. It's after everything that they need to do.
You're an artist. Draw my portrait, please.
Yeah, it's not everywhere. Not in Moscow, not in St. Petersburg. There are a lot of good museums in Moscow, but
again, I would still say it's not actually that much different in this country. We've had loads of examples where local government, in provincial cities that are struggling in recessions, are saying it's much more important to let's sell this painting from our art gallery, which belongs to our public, because it's much more important to feed our young children or to keep our employment up. So it's not such. But I was going to ask you actually. You touched on education. Could you say a little bit about education in Russia? For I remember before 2000, children in our primary schools in London rarely went to see contemporary or modern art. And when Tate Modern opened in 2000, that's one of the big changes I would say over the last 15 years, is that you see really, really young children now looking at contemporary art in places like Tate Modern. You only used to see them in the National Gallery. I don't know if do you think that is something that might change attitudes in Russian cities, not just Moscow, but throughout Russia?
Yeah, I think it might change, of course, because in Russia everywhere in May it's the museum night, yeah. And if you go to the main streets in any city, like province city, like our city, like Krasnodar, it's free enter to the art museum, yeah. And the museum is one part of this museum is well done, and there are classic paintings, sculptures like that. And another part of museum, it's not so well done. There are self-organized artists did something, and it's always traffic there. The people are really interested. I think May. At May it's a month. I mean at May.
Any reason why May?
So the museum night in May. I mean.
I'm totally naive. That's interesting. Yeah.
I think a way of accelerating. I think a way of accelerating the appreciation of art outside metropolitan cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg would be a combination of government-funded or private-funded excursion trips, right at the grassroots of education for young kids, like we have here. But probably in Russia, what you need to have first is probably more privately funded excursion trips for for schools, for children at a much young age. So they're exposed to contemporary art a lot earlier, rather than...
It's sad, but in our school in Russia, we don't have a historical of art.
Art history?
Art historical. It's really art of history.
It exists, but very short.
It's a very, very small part of history of Russia. It's really...
But if we take any city as Moscow...
рисование длится до 7 класса.
Drawing until the 7th class. Grade. Yeah, and so, but in Moscow there is a new museum that calls Udarnik. It's the Kandinsky Prize exhibition is there. It's the old cinema, and now it's the Contemporary Art Museum. And very crowded. There is crowded. There are a lot of people and a lot of children, really. And also in Garage, maybe the place. It's opened in one of the central
program
park.
In Garage.
I can say that the Moscow this year Moscow changed.
Yeah, really changed.
You can see. So it's much better.
For example, the biggest garden.
Central Park,
like
Central
Guide Park in London. The park Gorkova is changed. Absolutely.
Yeah.
5 years ago, a lot of men with beer and cigarettes sit in this garden. But now,
no, that's okay.
People on a bicycle playing petang and
reading
a book, and it's
education level. Yeah.
I'm just going to say about the teaching of art history. We at Sotheby's Institute, we're now combining with the Association of Art Historians, which is like a public sector, art historical sort of organisation, and they've realised that art history isn't taught enough in state schools. It is taught in, public schools, as we call them, that you pay for the rich, if you like. Sotheby's is now joining with the Association of Art Historians. They're going to actually start teaching for free art history A level, like for 17 and 18-year-olds at the institute. So again, I'm making this point that it isn't quite as rosy as it might seem. There's social classes involved in this country, and it tends to be kind of people with cultural capital or money who learn art history, and there's a gender divide as well. It tends to be girls' schools rather than boys' schools that teach the art history.
I think we're running over time, but just on this peachy note, there's a lot we can do, I guess, right? And it's down to us, artists, galleries, institutions, everyone that are involved, both in Russia, outside Russia, here in the UK as well, everywhere. So I guess the future is bright. We just press on.
No, the future will be perfect.
The future will be perfect, even better. Perfection is the way we go.
Trust me.
There's no way around it.
Look at this.
Look at this. Look at the future. How much more perfect can it get?
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.